You smell it before you see it. Popcorn, yes, but not the clean engineered butter flavoring of today. This is something older. Coconut oil scorching at the bottom of a steel kettle, a smell that gets into your coat and stays there. Mixed underneath it, just faintly, is the cold water must of a carpet that's been damp and dried and damp again for 30 years. You're standing on the sidewalk. The marquee letters are plastic, the kind you rearrange with a long pole and a hook, and someone misspelled the title last week and just left it. The glass case poster beside the door has a photo that's slightly too dark, slightly too small for the frame. A handwritten index card taped inside says, "Matinee, adults $1.50, children 75C, seniors 50C, no passes." You push open the door. The hinges are heavy. Inside, the light is amber and low. Somewhere in the dark, a piano, or maybe it's a Wurlitzer, is playing something that has no particular name. And the man behind the candy counter already knows what you're going to order. At its peak, the neighborhood movie theater was a one-screen operation anchored to a specific block, in a specific town, run by a specific family, often the same family for 2 or 3 decades. The building itself was usually built in the 1920s or 30s, in a style that took theatrical architecture seriously. A marquee that lit up the street, a small lobby with a terrazzo floor, a concession counter with a glass case full of boxed candy arranged by hand each morning. The auditorium held maybe 400 seats. The screen was a single fixed canvas. The projection booth was a small hot room above the back rows, staffed by a projectionist who was in many towns a minor civic figure, someone who'd seen every film shown in that building for the past 15 years and had opinions about all of them. There was an unspoken social contract here. You arrived a few minutes early, not late. If the house was full, you shared an armrest without discussion. During the newsreel, you could talk. During the feature, you did not. Children sat in the front half. Couples sat in the back. These rules were never posted anywhere. Everyone knew them. And the owner, or the manager, or whoever stood near the door on a Friday night, knew faces. Not necessarily names, but faces. The woman who always got the same seat. The kid who came alone on Saturday afternoons for 2 years straight. That kind of low-grade human recognition that costs nothing and means more than it should. The business model was simpler than it looked and more fragile than anyone admitted at the time. Exhibitors, the theater owners, paid film studios a percentage of ticket revenue called a film rental fee, typically between 25 and 50%, depending on the title and how long it had been running. The rest of the ticket price covered overhead, the building, the staff, the projectionist's union wage. Concessions were where the real margin lived. A box of Raisinets cost almost nothing to stock and sold for 4 times its value. Popcorn was even better. Exhibitors kept 100% of concession revenue. This is still true today. It was true then. The ticket was the reason you came. The popcorn was how the lights stayed on. What kept single-screen theaters viable through the 1950s and 60s was a combination of population density and limited competition. In towns of 10,000 to 50,000 people, one theater could reliably fill seats 3 or 4 nights a week. Television existed, but early TV had a limited picture, no film library worth mentioning, and nothing that felt like an event. Going to the movies was still a reason to leave the house. It still had the quality of occasion. 2 forces ended the neighborhood theater. They arrived decades apart, but the first one quietly built the conditions for the second. In 1948, the Supreme Court ruled in United States v. Paramount Pictures that the major studios had illegally monopolized the film industry. At the time, studios owned their own theater chains. They made the films, distributed the films, and controlled where the films were shown. The court ordered vertical divestiture. Studios had to sell their theaters. This was, in principle, a victory for independent exhibitors. In practice, it removed the one force that had kept exhibition somewhat stable: studio investment in physical infrastructure. Over the following decades, exhibition became an independent industry with thin margins, aging buildings, and no corporate parent willing to absorb a bad year. Then came the multiplex. By the late 1960s and accelerating through the 70s, developers discovered that building 8 or 12 screen theaters inside shopping malls was dramatically more cost-efficient per screen than operating a single-screen downtown property. The studios, no longer owning theaters but still negotiating with them, naturally preferred exhibitors who could open a film on dozens of screens simultaneously. Then, in 1977, the home video market arrived in earnest. Not the death blow, that took years, but the beginning of audiences learning to wait. If a film would eventually come to your living room, the urgency of attending its theatrical run diminished. The neighborhood theater needed opening weekend business to survive. Every reason to stay home was a reason it fell further behind. What closed first were the oldest buildings in the smallest towns. Rural communities and low-income urban neighborhoods lost their theaters through the late 70s and 80s, while suburban multiplexes were still expanding. For elderly residents without cars, for families without reliable transportation, the local theater hadn't just been entertainment. It had been the one cultural venue within walking distance. When it closed, nothing replaced it in the same way or the same place. The projectionists were unionized and skilled and largely disappeared as a profession. The family owners who had run these buildings for a generation retired or sold at a loss. The buildings themselves were converted to furniture stores, churches, and eventually parking lots, with the marquee left standing just long enough to become a local landmark, then taken down. You probably don't miss the theater itself. Not really. The seats weren't comfortable. The cushions had gone flat somewhere around 1961, and nobody got around to replacing them. The sound was uneven. The left side of the room always heard the dialogue a little cleaner than the right. The print was sometimes scratched, sometimes spliced badly in the middle of a scene, and if you went on a humid August night, the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle, and you knew it. None of that was what made it worth going. What you miss, if you're honest, is smaller than that, and harder to name. You miss being expected. The man at the door who nodded, not because he remembered your name, but because he'd seen you enough times to know you belonged there. That nod cost him nothing. It meant more than it should have. There's a specific kind of recognition that exists below friendship, below even acquaintance, and it's almost gone now from daily life. The theater had it, the diner had it, the hardware store had it. One by one, the places that held it closed, and we didn't notice what we were losing until the nod was just gone. You miss the quiet agreement between a room full of strangers, people who had nothing else in common, that for 2 hours this was the only thing happening. No one was elsewhere. No one was reachable. The darkness made everyone equal in a way that's difficult to manufacture now, and impossible to explain to someone who didn't feel it firsthand. You were in a room with your neighbors, and you were all, briefly, the same kind of person, someone who had shown up. The Wurlitzer winding down, the lights going the rest of the way out. That particular quality of anticipatory silence, when the last of the ambient noise dropped away and something was about to begin. Someone had arranged a room for you. They'd gotten the temperature as right as they could manage. They'd put the candy in the case. They'd changed the letters on the marquee by hand, on a ladder in the cold, because something new was playing and you should know about it. They'd chosen, with some care or some luck or some genuine knowledge of what their town liked, something worth watching. It was a small set of gestures, and none of them were remarkable, and together they added up to a place that felt like it had been made with you in mind. That's the thing that didn't transfer. The multiplex has more screens and better sound and seats that actually recline. What it doesn't have is any particular feeling that your presence was anticipated. You are a transaction now. You were a neighbor then. The projector clicks off. The white light holds on the screen for just a second, longer than you'd expect, that pure white square floating in the dark. Before that goes out too. The house lights come up slow, people gather their coats, nobody's in a hurry. Outside, the marquee is still lit, spelling out something you've already seen, waiting for whoever comes tomorrow night. If you went to a neighborhood single-screen theater as a kid, or even as an adult, tell us about it in the comments. Not just the name, but something specific. What it smelled like, what you always ordered, whether there was something a little wrong with it that you didn't mind at all. Those details are worth keeping. And if this kind of history is the kind you come back for, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.